Lewistown doesn't change, no matter how much the world around it changes. The same Victorian mansions on Maple Street, the same weather vane on City Hall, the same smell of pulp from the paper mill when the wind blows from the east. I've lived here all my life, and the city has become an extension of me, or I'm a part of it. I pull into the driveway of my house, jamming the engine of my old but impeccably maintained Buick. Every night after work, I check the oil level and wipe down the dashboard, a habit ingrained from 20 years of ownership. There's no point in buying a new car in retirement, I tell myself, even though I have the money to do it. Or there was, before Lawrence decided to change his life. I take the mail out of the box, advertisements, bills, and an envelope with the Westmoreland Law School logo on it. I already know what's inside is another tuition bill, $42,000 a year, an amount that makes me cringe every time, but I keep paying. The house greets me with silence. 3 years ago, Elaine's voice was still here, her laughter filling the rooms. Cancer took her quickly, as if fate decided it had already been too generous in giving us 34 years together. Everything in the living room is still as it was when she was there. The same curtains, the same pictures on the mantelpiece, the same china dog she brought back from her only trip abroad. Sometimes I think I need to change something, to move on, but I can't find the strength. I'm not the kind of widower who pours whiskey over his grief or stays in his bedroom 24 hours a day. Too much to do. Too many commitments. At 62, I still get up at 6 in the morning, run 2 miles around the neighborhood, eat a full breakfast. A habit developed over 37 years in the factory doesn't disappear just because now I have no need to rush to work. The factory where I've worked all my life was bought by an international conglomerate 2 years ago. The new owners quickly got rid of the excess staff by offering generous severance packages to those who would agree to leave voluntarily. At 59, I was too expensive for the company, despite my experience as chief engineer. I didn't put up a fight. Elaine's health was already a concern at the time, and I thought the extra time with her was more important than any job. I opened the envelope from law school, just as I expected, a notice of impending payment for the spring semester. I set it aside on the dresser next to the pictures. Lawrence as a child, a smiling boy with a missing front tooth. Lawrence as a teenager, looking away from the camera. Lawrence with an engineering degree, a strained smile that I then mistook for fatigue after exams. My son. My continuation, as I had naively assumed. A late-born child, born when Elaine and I had already despaired of having children. Now he's 35, and it's like there's an ocean-wide chasm between us. I can't pinpoint exactly when it all went wrong. Maybe it started when he was a teenager. I was always strict but fair, I thought. Lawrence, on the other hand, saw me as a tyrant who set standards too high. Or maybe the rift happened when he left for college, choosing engineering not out of vocation, but because of my pressure. I was so proud that my son would follow in my footsteps that I didn't notice his absent look at the graduation ceremony. Elaine saw what I missed. "He's doing this for you, Errol," she said. "Not because he likes it." I waved it off. "He just doesn't realize yet the promise of a technical education." Elaine shook her head, but didn't argue. She had always been a buffer between us, smoothing out the rough edges, finding compromises. Without her, our communication became a formality. The ringing of the phone interrupts my musings. The name Lawrence flashes on the screen. Lately, he only calls when he needs something. I take a deep breath before answering. "Hey, son." "Hey, Dad. How are you?" His voice sounds unnaturally cheerful. "I'm fine. Just got back from my walk. How are you? How's school?" "I'm great. Hey, Meredith and I were wondering, could you wire us some money to fix my car? Her transmission's out of gear, and I can't do anything without my car, with the commute to the university and all." I close my eyes. This is the fifth emergency financial aid in the last 6 months, not counting the regular tuition and rent payments. How much do you need? 3,000, he answers, as if asking for change for coffee. I know it's a lot of money, but it's Meredith. You know what kind of car she has. I know exactly what her car is. A brand new crossover that they bought on credit right after the wedding without consulting me. The loan, of course, is on me, too. Okay, I say after a pause. I'll transfer it today. Great. I knew I could rely on you, his voice warms. Listen, Meredith and I were thinking, why don't you come over for Christmas? We'll sit down and celebrate together. This invitation takes me by surprise. Lawrence hasn't invited me over since he and Meredith moved in together. Yeah? Yeah, I'd love to. Oh, great. How about Christmas Eve, 6 p.m.? Meredith will cook something special. We exchange a few more sentences, and then the conversation ends. I sit staring at the phone in my hand with an unfamiliar sense of hope. Maybe our relationship is really working out. Maybe Meredith has finally decided to give me a chance. Meredith Brody, now Kingsford, came into Lawrence's life a year ago, and 3 months later, they were married. The wedding was modest, almost secret. I found out about it ex post facto, receiving a text message with a picture. You'll get to know her later, Dad. We're really busy right now. Later turned out to be 2 months later, when they needed money for a down payment on an apartment. Meredith gave the impression of a calculating woman who knew exactly what she wanted out of life. Her cold politeness toward me was alarming from the start, but I tried to approach her for Lawrence's sake. Every attempt to get closer, however, was met with polite but firm rejection. Last spring, Lawrence announced that he was quitting his job as a project engineer, marrying Meredith, and going to law school. I always wanted to be a lawyer, Dad. It's my true calling, he said at the time. I was silent on the fact that his real calling turned up in suspicious timing, just when early retirement and redundancy pay provided me with a decent sum of money. I recall the last serious conversation I had with my son, shortly after Elaine's funeral. He was sitting in this very kitchen, fiddling with a cup of cold coffee. You know, Dad, he said then, looking out the window, I always felt like I was disappointing you. No matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Lawrence, it's not. No, let me finish, he interrupted. Mom always said that you just didn't know how to express your feelings, that you were actually proud of me. Is that true? I froze, not knowing what to say. Of course I was proud of him, but it was also true that I rarely said it out loud, believing that my actions spoke for themselves. Didn't I work overtime to pay for his college? Didn't I fix his first car instead of buying him a new one? I always wanted the best for you, I finally said. He grinned bitterly. That's not an answer, Dad. But I understood. After that conversation, he became even more distant. He called rarely, came even less often. I justified it with his busyness at work, not wanting to admit the obvious my son was avoiding me. And then Meredith showed up, and it just got worse. The phone's ringing again. This time it's Gareth Pierce, my former colleague from the factory, the only friend I have left after I retired. Errol, what are you doing tomorrow? Can we meet at the Chesman for a game or two? Chesman's is a little cafe in downtown Lewistown where chess enthusiasts gather. Gareth and I play there every week. Sure, I replied. At the usual time? Yeah, 2 o'clock. And, listen, come by early. I want to show you something before the game. Is something wrong? Pause on the other end of the line. Probably nothing serious. Just something you should know about. I've known Gareth for 30 years. He's not prone to drama and rarely speaks in riddles. There's something in his voice that makes me wary. Okay, I'll be early. Finished talking, I head to the bank to wire money to Lawrence. On the way, I think about the Christmas invitation. For the past 3 years, I've spent the holidays alone. Elaine always loved Christmas, decorating the whole house, making turkey and apple pie from her grandmother's recipe. After she died, I didn't even put up a Christmas tree. What's the point of holiday decorations when the house is empty? At the bank, I'm greeted by a young employee named Lucinda. She knows me by name. Everyone knows everyone in small towns. Good afternoon, Mr. Kingsford. Can I help you? Hello, Lucinda. I need to wire $3,000. She's entering the information into the computer. To the same account as last time? Yes, the same account. While she's making the transfer, I notice a picture of a little girl on her desk. Your daughter? I ask. Lucinda smiles. Yes, Emily. She's 5 years old. She's a beautiful girl, I say. Looks just like you. Thank you. Her smile grows wider. She's my joy. And a major expense, she adds with a chuckle. Do you know how much a good education costs nowadays? I nod. I know firsthand. My son is getting a second degree, a law degree. Oh, that's great, Lucinda exclaims. You must be very proud of him. Yes, I answered automatically. Very proud. After I finish my business at the bank, I head to the mall. I need to buy Christmas presents for Lawrence and Meredith. I spend a long time wandering between the counters, trying to figure out what to get them. I used to know exactly what my son liked. Now it's like I'm picking out a gift for an outsider. I end up settling on an expensive leather briefcase for Lawrence, a fitting accessory for a future lawyer, and a silk scarf for Meredith. The saleswoman wraps the purchases in festive paper, and I suddenly realize that for the first time in 3 years I feel a pleasant excitement before Christmas. Maybe Lawrence's invitation really is a chance for a fresh start. Maybe Meredith finally sees me not only as a source of funding, but as a human being? I realize I'm expecting too much from one dinner, but I can't suppress hope. The next day, I arrive at the Chessman half an hour early. Gareth is already waiting for me at our usual table in the corner. A brown envelope lies in front of him. Errol, he stands up to shake my hand. Thanks for coming in early. Is it something serious? I ask, sitting down across from him. Gareth looks around as if to see if anyone's listening, then leans closer. Do you remember Jeff Wilson? He worked in the accounts department at the factory. Vaguely, I say. The short guy with the bald spots? That's the one. Anyway, his son goes to Westmoreland Law School. He teaches there. And you know what's interesting? He's never met a student named Lawrence Kingsford. I feel a chill run down my spine. There must be some mistake. Lawrence has been studying there for 6 months. Gareth shrugs. Maybe. I asked Jeff to check the database. He sent me this. He slides an envelope toward me. Inside is a printout of the Westmoreland Law School student list. I look through it slowly, line by line. Kingsford isn't there. It's some kind of mistake, I repeat, but my voice sounds uncertain. Errol, Gareth puts his hand on my shoulder. I've wanted to talk to you about this for a long time. You're giving him too much. The guy's 35 and he's living off you like a teenager. He's getting an education, I object. It's an investment in his future. Are you sure he's really studying? Gareth looks me straight in the eye. Have you seen his student card, the class schedule, exam grades? Gareth's questions make me wonder. Indeed, apart from the tuition bills, I've seen no evidence of Lawrence's studies. But why would he deceive me? What's the point? I trust my son, I say, but an inner voice whispers, should you? Look, I'm not trying to get between you and Lawrence, Gareth continues. Just be careful. Check the facts before you hand over all your savings. I nod, but a storm of emotions rages inside me. Disbelief, anger, resentment, fear. What if Gareth is right? What if my son really is deceiving me? Thank you, I say at last. Yeah, I'll deal with it. Gareth squeezes my shoulder. You know I'm always on your side, right? I know. We start the game, but I can't concentrate. I make mistake after mistake, and Gareth quickly backs me into a corner. Checkmate, he announces after 20 minutes. Errol, you're not yourself today. Why don't we reschedule the game for another day? I nod. I'm sorry. I need to, I need to think. Guy, sure. He picks up the pieces. Call me if you want to talk, anytime. I thank him and walk out of the cafe. My head is buzzing with thoughts. Is Lawrence really deceiving me? Has my loyalty and support meant nothing to him all these years? On my way home, I stop in front of the Westmoreland Law School building, a stately red brick structure with columns at the entrance. I've never been here before. Lawrence always said I was a busy person and didn't want to distract me with a campus visit. As I enter the main lobby, I feel insecure, like an intruder. There is a young woman sitting at the front desk. "What can I do for you?" she asks with a professional smile. "Yeah, I'm looking for my son," I say. "Lawrence Kingsford. He's a law student." She's checking something on the computer. "I'm sorry, but we don't have a student by that name." "There must be some mistake," I insist. "He's been here since the fall." "I pay his tuition." The woman checks again. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no Lawrence Kingsford in our database. Perhaps you were referring to another school?" I can feel the ground slipping from under my feet. Then Gareth was right. Lawrence lied to me. All those months, all that money. "Sir, are you all right?" the receptionist asks worriedly. "Yes," I squeeze out. "It's just, I must have made a mistake." Once outside, I stand for a long time, unsure of what to do next. Part of me wants to call Lawrence immediately and demand an explanation. The other part is afraid of what I might hear. In the end, I decide to wait. Christmas dinner is in 3 days. I'll meet him face to face and figure it out then. Coming home, I feel devastated. All my life I've tried to be a good father. Strict, maybe, but fair. I worked my ass off to give Lawrence the best education, the best opportunities. And this is how he repays me. I pull out my phone to call Gareth, but I change my mind. What am I going to tell him? That he was right? That my son is a liar and a cheat? That I seem to have lost my last loved one? No, I must hear Lawrence's side of the story first. I must give him a chance to explain himself. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe it's not what it seems. But in my heart, I know the truth. And that knowledge makes my heart clench with pain. 3 days before Christmas, Lewistown was transformed. Colorful garlands wrapped around the lampposts on Main Street, holiday decorations appeared in storefronts, and a huge Christmas tree decorated with toys and ribbons was set up in the square in front of the town hall. Even the gray winter sky seemed to brighten in anticipation of the holiday. I sat in the living room, looking at the box of Christmas toys I'd gotten from the attic the day before. Third Christmas without Elaine. The first two, I hadn't even tried to get in the holiday spirit. Why decorate the house if there was no one to enjoy it? But this time was different. Lawrence's invitation made me remember what this holiday used to be like. Noisy, bright, full of family warmth. Opening the box, I carefully pulled out the first ornament, a glass angel that Elaine had bought when we were first married. For 40 years, that angel had witnessed our Christmas evenings. I ran my fingers over the fragile wings, remembering how Elaine had always insisted that this particular toy crowned the top of the Christmas tree. This year the angel will be watching us from the box, I thought, as I carefully returned it to its place. There was no point in decorating the tree for the sake of one evening in an empty house. I'd spend Christmas at Lawrence and Meredith's, and then come back here, to the quiet of my four walls. A phone call interrupted my musings. Gareth's name popped up on the screen. "How are you?" he asked without preamble. "Did you find out anything?" "No," I answered. "I decided to wait until after Christmas dinner. I'll talk to him face to face." "That's wise." Gareth paused for a moment, then added, "Just be prepared for the truth to be unpleasant." "Unpleasant." "I know," I sighed. "But I have to give him a chance to explain himself." "Of course," Gareth agreed. "Just take care of yourself, okay? And call me when you figure it out." "I will," I promised. After talking to Gareth, I decided to check the gifts for Lawrence and Meredith again. The leather briefcase and silk scarf were beautifully wrapped in holiday paper and tied with ribbons. I'd spent almost $1,000 on them, an amount that would have made me think twice even a year ago. But it felt right now. A good gift could be a bridge to rebuilding a relationship. The thought that Lawrence might have been deceiving me about his studies kept me on my toes. I replayed our recent conversations over and over in my head, trying to find hints, signs I might have missed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe he'd changed his name on the paperwork or was studying at a different branch. But the facts said otherwise. There was no student named Lawrence Kingsford in the Westmoreland Law School database. And yet I transferred large sums of money every month to pay tuition. On Christmas Day, I woke up early, feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. The evening ahead could change everything for better or worse. I slowly got ready, carefully choosing my clothes. I settled on the navy blue suit Elaine had given me for our last Christmas together. "You look 10 years younger in it," she'd said then. I wondered if Lawrence would notice that I was wearing my father's suit. I spent the rest of the day doing little chores, trying to distract myself from my anxious thoughts. Shoveled snow from the driveway, even though it wasn't necessary. Reread old Christmas cards stored in my dresser drawer. Even baked ginger cookies from Elaine's recipe, the first time in 3 years. Toward evening, a light snow began to fall. I watched the white flakes fall to the ground and remembered how Elaine and I had walked the snow-covered streets of Lewistown the first winter after we were married. She said then, "Snow is letters from heaven. Those we love are sending us news that they are okay." In that moment, I could almost feel her presence beside me, as if she was standing behind my shoulder, looking at that same snowfall. "You'd know what to do," I thought. "You always knew how to get through to him." At 6:30, I got in my car and headed toward Lawrence and Meredith's house. They were renting an apartment in River Park, a new apartment complex in an upscale Lewistown neighborhood. The monthly rent there exceeded the size of my pension, but I never once voiced any doubts when Lawrence informed me of his choice. "Meredith deserves comfort, Dad, and it's a great place to start a family." Parking outside the glass and concrete high-rise, I grabbed a bag of gifts and headed for the entrance. The uniformed concierge nodded and pointed to the elevator. "Apartment 712, sir." As I reached the 7th floor, I stood for a moment in front of the door with the number 712. My heart was pounding like a teenager on a first date. I took a deep breath and pressed the bell button. Meredith opened the door. Tall, slender, with perfect hair and makeup, she looked like a model from a glossy magazine. She was wearing a tight black dress that I was sure cost a fortune. "Errol," she smiled strainedly. "Welcome." "Thank you for inviting me, Meredith." I handed her the bottle of wine I'd bought on the way over. "Merry Christmas." "You too." She took the bottle with 2 fingers, as if it weren't very clean. "Come in. Lawrence will be right in." The apartment was astonishing in its size and design. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snow-covered Lewistown. Minimalist furniture, abstract paintings on the walls, and chrome light fixtures all screamed money and refined taste. I set the bag of gifts under the small artificial fir tree in the corner of the living room and looked around. Not a single photograph. Not a single hint that my family lived here. "It's a beautiful apartment," I said, trying to make conversation. "Thanks," Meredith shrugged. "It's a good place to start. When Lawrence graduates and starts practicing, we'll buy our own house, of course." I nodded, noting the confidence in her voice. Either she didn't know Lawrence wasn't in law school or she was an accomplice to deception. "Dad!" Lawrence emerged from the hallway with a wide smile. "I'm glad you came." He hugged me, and for a moment I felt like the little boy I'd once taught to ride a bike. Then he pulled away and I saw before me a grown man with a neatly trimmed beard and designer thin-rimmed glasses. "Merry Christmas, son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Merry Christmas." He pointed to the couch. "Have a seat. What are you drinking? We have a nice scotch you like." I sank down on the couch, feeling strangely uncomfortable in this sterile space. "Scotch will be fine, thank you." Lawrence walked over to the bar against the far wall and poured 2 glasses of the amber liquid. "Meredith, darling," he called. "The usual for you? Martini?" "Yes, with an olive," she said from the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready." Lawrence brought me a glass and sat down in the chair across from me. "How are you, Dad? How are you?" "Fine." I took a sip of scotch. "How are you? How's school?" Was it just me, or was there a split second of concern in his eyes? "I'm great," he smiled broadly. "The professors say I have a talent for law. I guess it's not for nothing that I decided to change careers." "I'm glad to hear that." I tried to make my voice sound natural. "What subjects are you particularly interested in?" "Oh, constitutional law, definitely," he began excitedly. And if I hadn't known he wasn't a student, I would have believed every word he said. Meredith joined us with a martini glass in her hand. She sat next to Lawrence, putting her hand on his shoulder in a possessive gesture. "Dinner in 15 minutes," she announced. "I hope you like duck, Errol?" "Yes, of course," I nodded, though I'd never really been a fan of the dish. There was an awkward pause. I looked around, trying to find something to talk about. "Are you planning any traveling for the holidays?" I finally asked. Meredith and Lawrence exchanged quick glances. "Actually, yes," Lawrence said. "We're thinking of going to Vermont for a week. There's a new ski resort there that's very exclusive." "That sounds wonderful." I took another sip of scotch. "When are you planning the trip?" "Next week." Meredith fixed her hair. "Lawrence will be on vacation at the university, so it's perfect timing." I felt anger building inside. They kept lying to my face, planning to spend my money on a luxury vacation without even considering that I might find out the truth. Speaking of the university, I tried to keep my voice casual. "I drove by Westmoreland Law School the other day. It's an impressive building." Lawrence tensed, but quickly pulled himself together. "Yeah, the campus is amazing. You should come by sometime. I'll show you around." "I'd love to," I nodded. "Maybe next week?" Uh, he hesitated. "Next week's not a good week. It's a session, you know, and then we're leaving right away." "I understand." I finished my scotch. "Maybe some other time." Meredith stood up suddenly. "I'm gonna go check on the duck. Lawrence, help me, please." They retreated to the kitchen, and I heard muffled conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was tense, anxious. Left alone, I looked around the living room more carefully. There were glossy travel and interior design magazines on the coffee table. On a shelf stood an expensive home theater. In the corner was a brand new electronic exercise machine that must have cost a fortune. All of these things were bought with my money. Money I'd allocated for my son's education, for his future, and he spent it on luxuries and lies. Lawrence returned from the kitchen with a strained smile. "Dinner's ready, Dad. Shall we go to the table?" The dining room was as spotless as the rest of the apartment. White tablecloth, silverware, crystal glasses. In the center of the table was a roast duck surrounded by a side of vegetables and some kind of sauce. "It looks delicious," I said, sitting down in the designated seat. "Meredith is a great cook," Lawrence said proudly. "She'd taken lessons from a French chef." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I didn't know there were French chefs in Lewistown." "Online courses," Meredith explained quickly. "Very convenient." She began carving the duck, and the conversation turned to neutral topics: weather, the latest news, Christmas traditions. I responded automatically, watching them interact with each other. Something about their relationship seemed contrived, like they were playing the roles of the happy couple just for me. "Do you remember how Mom and I always made turkey for Christmas?" I asked Lawrence, when the conversation turned to family traditions. Sure, he nodded, but there was no warmth of memory in his eyes. Mom always made a terrific cranberry gravy. Lingonberry, I corrected. She didn't like cranberries. Oh yes, cranberry, he corrected quickly. It's been so many years, the details fade. Yes, time flies. I cut off a piece of duck. It seems like only yesterday you were a little boy who believed in Santa Claus. And today, you're a married man, a future lawyer. At the word lawyer, Meredith shuddered slightly, but immediately pulled herself together. Lawrence will be a great lawyer, she said. He has a talent for persuading people. I'm sure he will. I looked directly at my son. He always knew how to find the right words. The atmosphere at the table was getting more and more tense. I could feel Lawrence's anxiety growing as Meredith tried to control the situation, directing the conversation in a safe direction. "How's your new neighbor, Dad?" Lawrence suddenly asked. "The one who moved into the Jenkins house?" "Willis Tate," I nodded. "He's a nice man, ex-military sailor." "Oh, that's interesting." Meredith was clearly trying to keep the subject alive. "He must have seen a lot of the world." "Yeah, served on a submarine." I sipped my wine. "He has amazing stories." "You must spend a lot of time together," Meredith suggested. "We play chess from time to time," I shrugged. "But mostly I hang out with Gareth Pierce, my former co-worker from the factory." "Oh, that bore," Lawrence grimaced. "He always struck me as a bit too straightforward. Gareth is an honest man." I looked my son straight in the eye. "He always tells the truth, even if it's unpleasant to hear, a rare quality these days." Lawrence twirled his glass nervously in his hands. "Yes, of course. I just meant that he's not the most diplomatic interlocutor. Sometimes diplomacy is just another name for lying," I said. There was a long pause. Meredith was the first to break the silence. "Would anyone like dessert? We have an amazing cheesecake from the new bakery on Oak Street." "I'd love some," I smiled, but the smile didn't touch my eyes. While Meredith went to get dessert, Lawrence and I were left alone. He was clearly nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses and avoiding a direct look. "Is everything all right, son?" I asked. "You seem tense." "I'm fine, Dad," he smiled, strained. "Just a little tired. End of the semester, a lot of work." "I understand," I nodded. "Going to law school takes a lot of energy." "Yeah, exactly." He grasped the explanation with relief. "Sometimes I literally sleep in the library." "The Westmoreland Library?" I asked innocently. "Yes. It has an amazing collection of legal literature. Every word he said was a lie. Every gesture, every look, everything was false." My son, my only child, looked me in the eye and shamelessly lied. Meredith came back with cheesecake, and the tension between us dissipated a little. We talked about nothing, avoiding dangerous topics. I watched them, trying to figure out how deep their deception went. What else were they hiding from me? After dessert, Lawrence offered to open the presents. I agreed, and we moved back into the living room. I watched as they unwrapped my expensive presents, feigning delight and gratitude. "Dad, this is amazing," Lawrence exclaimed, twirling the leather briefcase in his hands. "Just what I need for my studies." "The scarf is beautiful, Errol," Meredith said with a strained smile. "How did you know I liked silk?" I shrugged, smiling. "I just assumed." Then it was their turn to give gifts. They handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside were cufflinks, silver engraved, "To the best dad." "Thank you," I said, looking at the gift. "They're wonderful." We picked them out together. Lawrence put his hand on Meredith's shoulder. "We wanted them to be special." I nodded, unable to force out a smile. Those cufflinks were worth $50 at best. After all the money I'd put into them, it was their gift. A cheap pair of cufflinks with corny engraving. The evening went on. We drank coffee, talked about future plans. Lawrence talked about his future legal career, Meredith about the house they wanted to buy after his graduation. And all the while I sat there listening to their lies, feeling the anger building up inside. The tension at the table was building by the minute. I could feel the falseness in every word they said, in every smile. Meredith kept glancing at her watch, as if waiting for me to leave. Lawrence was pouring himself too much wine, his third glass of wine of the evening. I was an unwelcome guest in their cozy nest, built on my money. "More coffee, Errol?" Meredith asked with a strained politeness. "No, thank you," I replied. "I've had enough." There was an awkward silence. Lawrence drummed his fingers on the table, clearly nervous. I decided it was time to get to the point. "Lawrence," I began, "I've been thinking about your studies, about law school." He was visibly tense, but he tried to maintain a casual demeanor. "Yeah? What exactly are you interested in?" "I just wanted to make sure that my investment is being put to good use." Meredith and Lawrence exchanged quick glances. "Dad?" Lawrence grinned nervously. "You don't think that we— I don't know what to think," I interrupted. "I was at Westmoreland last week. Your name isn't on the student list." Lawrence's face turned pale. Meredith straightened up like a string. "There must be some mistake," she said quickly. "An administrative mix-up." "There's no confusion." I looked directly at my son. "You don't go there, do you? You never have." Lawrence opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding my gaze. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Dad, I can explain." "Yes, I think you should explain." My voice was quiet but firm. "Explain where the tens of thousands of dollars I transfer every month go." Lawrence swallowed. Then suddenly his face changed. He straightened, and there was something cold, alien in his eyes. "Ah, where do you think they're going?" He circled his hand around the spacious living room. "To all this. For the life we deserve." I felt something snap inside me. "You lied to me. All this time. What was I supposed to do?" He suddenly raised his voice. "Work as an engineer all my life, like you? Spend my best years in dusty shops, only to retire with arthritis and a cough?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. I work to give you a better life," I said quietly. "A better life?" He laughed bitterly. "You call that a better life? You forced me to follow in your footsteps, even though I never wanted to." "I never forced you to." "Really?" he interrupted. "What about engineers will always be in demand, son? Or technical specialties are the stable future? You've been drumming that into my head since I was a kid." Meredith put her hand on Lawrence's shoulder as if trying to reassure him, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She was enjoying the scene. "You could have just told me you wanted to change careers," I said. "I would have understood." "Would you?" Lawrence raised an eyebrow incredulously. "How did you get it when I wanted to study art in college, or when I talked about a career in journalism?" I remembered those conversations. Yes, I had discouraged him from those paths, believing them to be unreliable. But I meant well, didn't I? "I wanted stability for you," I said. "You wanted me to be a copy of you," Lawrence cut him off. "But you know what? I'm not you. And I'm not going to spend my life tinkering with iron and breathing chemicals. You make it sound like my job is something to be ashamed of." I felt my anger begin to boil up inside me. "That shameful job paid for your education and continues to pay for your lies." Meredith suddenly laughed, a cold, harsh laugh. "God, Errol, you're so provincial. The world has changed. This isn't the 90s, when you could spend your life turning nuts and consider yourself successful." I turned to her. "What do you consider success, Meredith? Living off other people's money? Cheating on someone who cares about you?" "We weren't cheating," she shrugged gracefully. "We were just, optimizing resources. You have nowhere to spend your money anyway. And we're young, with our whole lives ahead of us. And what were you planning? I asked. Always trying to extort money from me for a non-existent study? Of course not, Lawrence interjected. I was going to graduate from law school in a couple years. By then, my business should have picked up. Business? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. What kind of business? Investing in cryptocurrency, he straightened up proudly. I invest money in promising projects. Some of the funds you transferred to training went to this. I couldn't believe my ears. You were spending my money on, gambling with virtual money? That's not gambling. Lawrence was indignant. This is the future of finance. Of course, a dinosaur like you wouldn't understand that. A dinosaur, I repeated quietly. Yes, exactly. He couldn't hold back any longer. You're stuck in the last century with your screwdrivers and blueprints. The world has moved on, and you still think manual labor means something. Every word he said was like a knife stab. My own son looked at me with contempt, as if I were some kind of relic, a museum piece, not the man who had given him everything. Do you know what the funny thing is? Lawrence continued, exhilarated by his own speech. Your profession almost doesn't exist anymore. Everything is automated, computerized. People with your skills are no longer needed. That's why they threw you out of the factory like obsolete equipment. Meredith chuckled, covering her mouth with the palm of her hand. Lawrence, you're terrible, she said, but there was no reproach in her voice, just admiration. I'm just telling the truth, he shrugged. Dad, you have to admit, the world has changed. What worked in your day is useless now. As are moral principles, I suppose? I asked dryly. Oh, don't start preaching about honesty and hard work. Lawrence rolled his eyes. Do you think honest labor still means anything? Look at the real successful people today. They're the ones who know how to spin, capitalize on opportunities, find loopholes in the system. Like real lawyers? I couldn't resist the irony. Exactly. He didn't see the sarcasm. Real lawyers know how to manipulate the rules, how to compromise, how to adapt. Adapt, I repeated. You mean lie. Call it what you want, he shrugged. But that's how the world works, and that's how real money is made. Meredith nodded in agreement. You see, Errol, the problem with people of your generation is that you're too straightforward. You only see black and white, and life is shades of gray. Shades of gray, I echoed. And what shade did you assign to your own father's deception? It's not deceit, Lawrence was getting annoyed. It's strategic use of resources. You wanted to help me anyway, didn't you? What difference does it make what the money goes to? The difference is that you lied to me. I looked him straight in the eye. All this time, you looked me in the face and you lied to me. What was I supposed to do? He spread his hands. You would never have approved of my real plans. You're too conservative. I'm too old to understand the modern world, aren't I? I grinned bitterly. Too naive to realize that honesty is a relic of the past? Don't twist things around, Lawrence grumbled. I'm just saying that you live by outdated rules. The world has changed, Dad, and those who don't change with it stay on the sidelines. Like me, I nodded. Well, yeah, he didn't deny it. Look at you, living alone in a big empty house, every day the same thing, no perspective, no development, and all because you don't want to change, to try new things. His words hit me deeper than I wanted to admit. Was I really stuck in the past? Were my principles, which I thought were the foundation of my life, really just an anachronism? Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I really don't understand how the modern world works. But I know one thing for sure. I would never betray the man who loves me. Lawrence snorted. Love? Really, Dad? You're talking about love? When was the last time you said you love me? When you hugged me not out of obligation, but because you really wanted to? His question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth but couldn't find an answer right away. Oh, see? He grinned bitterly. You don't even remember. Because to you, love is about paying bills and giving advice no one asked for. You've never been interested in what I really want, what I dream about. That's not true, I argued, but my voice sounded unsure. No? He raised an eyebrow. Then tell me, what's my favorite book? What kind of music do I listen to? What were my hobbies as a teenager other than the activities you deemed useful? I kept quiet, not because I didn't know the answers. Some I did. But in that moment, I realized I'd never told him about it. I'd never shown him that I noticed his interests, his personality. Exactly, Lawrence nodded, taking my silence as confirmation. To you, I was always a project, not a person. An investment, not a son. It's not fair, I said quietly. No, unfair? He laughed. You know what's unfair? That you made me spend 4 years of my life in a profession I hate. That you never supported my real interests. That you always looked at me disappointed when I didn't meet your expectations. Meredith put her hand on Lawrence's shoulder. Darling, perhaps enough is enough, she said softly, but I could see the triumph in her eyes. She was savoring every moment of this scene. No, let her know, Lawrence waved her away. Let him know what it is to be the son of a man for whom work has always been more important than family. I worked for my family, I objected. Everything I did for you and your mother. But you were never there for me. He raised his voice. You were always in the factory, in your office, with your drawings and calculations. And when you came home, you were too tired to really be with us. There was some truth in what he said, and that was what hurt the most. I did work a lot, often coming home late, sometimes taking work on the weekends. But wasn't I doing it for them? To give them a comfortable life, a good education, opportunities that I didn't have? Mom understood that, I said. She knew why I worked so hard. Mom was a saint, Lawrence cut him off. She put up with a lot of things you don't even realize. Do you know how many times she cried because you canceled family dinner again because of a work emergency? How many times she's changed plans because you decided at the last minute that your business was more important? Those words were like a punch in the gut. Did Elaine really suffer because of my dedication to my work? She never showed it, always supported me, always told me she was proud of me. She never told me. I started. Of course she didn't, Lawrence interrupted. She was always protecting you, always a buffer between us. Daddy's very tired, dear. Daddy does it for us. Daddy loves us. He just doesn't know how to show it. How many times had I heard that? Meredith suddenly laughed. God, it's so familiar, she said. My father was the same way. Always at work, always for the family, and really just hiding from real life behind his desk. Exactly, Lawrence picked up on that. They think that paying the bills is taking care of the family. That financial security is more important than emotional connection. They kept talking about me in the third person, as if I were some abstract concept rather than a living person sitting right in front of them. I could feel something dying inside of me with every word they said. You know what the funny thing is? Lawrence turned to Meredith but spoke loud enough for me to hear. He thinks he can still control me through money, that I'll do his bidding forever just to get funding. Typical old-school thinking, Meredith nodded. Money as a tool of control. But it doesn't work anymore, Lawrence looked at me again. I've found my way, Dad. A way that doesn't involve turning nuts 8 hours a day and coming home smelling of machine oil. The path of deception, I said quietly. The path of adaptation, he corrected. The way of seizing opportunities. The way of the modern world. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. When had he become so cynical, so cold? When had this wall of misunderstanding grown between us? You know, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I've always been proud of you. Even when I didn't talk about it, I was proud of your success, your intelligence, your determination. I thought I'd raised an honest man." "Honesty doesn't pay the bills, Dad," Lawrence shrugged. "In the real world, it's the result that matters, not the means." "And what is the result?" I circled their apartment. "This? Expensive furniture? Fancy clothes? Is this something worth betraying your own father for?" "Don't be so dramatic," Meredith rolled her eyes. "No one betrayed anyone. We're just living our lives by our own rules." "At my expense," I added. "You offered to help," Lawrence reminded me. "We just accepted it. Under false pretenses." "Ooh, details," he dismissed. "The important thing is that we are building our future. A future in which we won't be dependent on obsolete professions and dying industries." "Unlike you," Meredith added with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I felt something finally break inside of me. It was as if the last thread that bound me to this man, my son, had broken. I looked at him and saw a stranger cold, calculating, willing to do anything for his own gain. "I think I should go," I said, getting up from the table. "Already?" Lawrence faked surprise. "We hadn't finished dessert yet." "I'm done," I replied, heading for the door. "With all of it." Lawrence and Meredith looked at each other. Worry flashed in their eyes for the first time all evening. "Dad, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" Lawrence stood up and followed me. "We can talk about this like adults." "There's nothing more to discuss." I stopped at the door and turned to him. "You've made your choice. I'll make mine." "What's that supposed to mean?" There was a note of panic in his voice. "You'll see." I opened the door. "Goodbye, Lawrence." "Dad, wait!" He grabbed my arm. "Let's not be too hasty. Maybe I was too harsh. Let's just talk calmly." I let go of his hand. "We've already talked. More than enough." Meredith appeared behind Lawrence's back. "Errol, don't take it so personally," she said with fake concern. "Lawrence was just blowing off steam. You know how emotional he can be after a few glasses of wine." "Yes, that's right," Lawrence said. "I didn't mean what I said. I was just upset that you found out about, you know, about you lying to me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or that you think I'm an obsolete dinosaur whose life and work are worthless." "That's not what I meant," Lawrence tried to smile. "You know I respect you." "No, I don't," I shook my head. "And I don't want to know anymore." With those words, I walked out of the apartment, ignoring their shouts and requests to come back. Taking the elevator down, I stepped out into the frosty evening and inhaled the cold air deeply. The snow was still falling, covering the world around me in a white blanket. I got into my car and just sat there for a few minutes without starting the engine. A storm of emotions raged inside me: pain, anger, frustration, betrayal. My son, my only child, the man I had lived for the past 35 years, was a stranger. Worse, he despised me, considered me obsolete, unnecessary. Starting the engine, I drove slowly out of the parking lot. Lewistown slept under a blanket of snow, sparse streetlights illuminating the empty streets. Christmas is a time of family, a time of love and forgiveness. But for me, this Christmas was the end of illusions. Back home, I sat in a chair in the dark living room. Without turning on the light, I stared at the snow falling outside the window and thought about Lawrence's words. Was there any truth in them? Was I really such a bad father? Was Elaine suffering because of my dedication to my work and I didn't even notice it? Maybe Lawrence was right about something. I really didn't know how to express my feelings, didn't know how to talk about love. For me, care was always expressed in concrete actions: to provide, to protect, to educate. Maybe that wasn't enough. But nothing justified his lies. Nothing justified the contempt with which he spoke of my life, my job, the values I held important. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. The bills for next semester's tuition had already arrived. The money was due in a week. $42,000. Money that wouldn't go towards education, but towards cryptocurrency investments and a life of luxury. Without hesitation, I canceled all scheduled payments. Then I went to the regular transfers section and canceled the monthly transfers to Lawrence's account. $5,000 each month for expenses, as he called it. Closing the app, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if a heavy weight I didn't even know existed had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how Lawrence would react to my decision, but I did know one thing for sure. I would no longer fund lies. I would no longer try to buy the love of a man who only saw me as a wallet. The morning after Christmas was clear and frosty. I woke up early, as usual, but for the first time in a long time I didn't feel a heaviness in my chest. Yesterday's decision to stop funding Lawrence was painful, but necessary. It was like ripping out a splinter that had been festering under his skin for a long time. Freshly fallen snow sparkled outside the window. I stood with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood kids building a snowman on the lawn across the street. Their tinkling laughter could be heard even through the closed windows. Life went on. The phone was silent all morning, and I knew it was the calm before the storm. Lawrence usually checked his bills after waking up, a habit I had instilled in him myself. Always know how much money is in your account, son. Financial mindfulness is the key to prosperity. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the first bell rang. Lawrence's name popped up on the screen, and I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. "Good morning," I said calmly. "Dad, what's going on?" Lawrence's voice sounded worried. "I checked the accounts, and there's some kind of mistake. The transfer for next semester has been canceled, and so have the monthly payments." "It's not a mistake," I replied. "I canceled all the payments." There was a pause. I could practically see him trying to comprehend what I was saying, trying to find the right response. "You... what?" he finally squeezed out. "But why?" "Because of last night." "Dad, I apologized. I was drunk. I said something stupid." "It's not your words, Lawrence. It's about your actions. You've been lying to me for months. You've been using me." "I didn't use you." His voice rose. I'm really going to be a lawyer. I'm just going about it in a different way." "Through cryptocurrency?" I couldn't contain my sarcasm. "That's a serious investment." He was indignant. "I could explain everything if you gave me a chance." "You've had plenty of chances, son. Every day you accepted money from me, knowing you were misusing it, was a chance to tell the truth." "Dad, listen to me." His tone became pleading. "I understand you're upset, but let's work this out like adults. I can come over tonight, and we can talk calmly." "There's no need," I interrupted. "My decision is final. I will no longer finance your fictitious education or your luxurious life." "You can't do that," he suddenly turned to shouting. "You promised to pay for my education. You can't just cancel it." "I promised to pay for your education," I said calmly. "Not your lifestyle, not your questionable investments. If you really want to study, I can pay for the courses directly to the institution, but no more transfers to your account." That's, that's blackmail," he blurted out. "You're trying to control me through money." I grinned bitterly, remembering his words yesterday about typical old-school thinking. "No, Lawrence, I just stopped being your ATM." "Meredith is right," he continued to shout. "You're a petty, vindictive old man. You take pleasure in ruining my life." "You chose your own path," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Now live with the consequences of your choice." "You'll regret it." His voice suddenly turned icy. "Believe me, you will regret it." He hung up, and I was left to listen to the ringing tone. Strangely, the threat didn't make me feel scared or anxious, only fatigue and a slight sadness. Not an hour later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Meredith. Errol. Her voice was honey-sweet. I think we've had a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Meredith, I answered. It's very clear. Look, she said, trying to be reasonable. I realized that Lawrence overreacted last night. He was upset. He had too much to drink. You know how emotional he is. I know, I agreed. But this isn't about what he said. It's about his lies. Oh, this is all a terrible misunderstanding, she sighed. You see, Lawrence was really going to go to law school. He even passed the entrance exam. But then this amazing opportunity to invest in a startup came up, so he decided to build up a financial cushion and then devote himself fully to his studies. And how long does this preparation last? I asked. 6 months? A year? And how much of my money went into this financial cushion? Errol, don't be so mercenary, she said, a hint of irritation in her voice. We're talking about your son's future. Don't you want him to be successful? Of course I do. But success built on lies and manipulation is not the kind of success I want for him. You're so, old-fashioned. Now she wasn't even trying to hide her contempt. Don't you realize that your stubbornness is jeopardizing our entire future? We have leases, loans, which you took out when you knew you couldn't pay them yourself, I finished for her. It was your decision, Meredith. Now you have to live with it. You're, you're just getting back at us. Her voice broke into a shriek. Revenge for Lawrence telling the truth about your worthless life. I remained silent, letting her vent her rage. Finally, she ran out of breath. Is that your last word? She asked icily. Yes, I answered firmly. Well, you'll regret it, she threatened and hung up. Two identical threats in one day. I wondered what they were up to. It didn't matter, though. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. The rest of the day passed in a strange calm. I put the Christmas decorations back in their boxes, shoveled the snow in the driveway, even started to dismantle the pantry, a task I'd been putting off for months. There was an unusual clarity in my head, as if I'd shed not only a financial burden, but an emotional one as well. In the evening, Gareth called. How are you, old boy? He asked me without preamble. All right, I replied. Better than I expected. What happened at dinner? Nothing good by the sound of your voice. I told him about last night, about Lawrence's words, about my decision to pull the funding. Gareth listened in silence, only occasionally humming. Well, he said when I'd finished, you did the right thing. You can't let yourself be used, even if it is your own child. I know, I sighed. It hurts to realize that all these years our relationship has been based on money. Hey, don't beat yourself up, Gareth's voice softened. You were a good father. It's not your fault Lawrence grew up like that. It's not your fault. Maybe it was partly mine. I looked at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Maybe I really didn't know how to show my love. Garbage, Gareth cut him off. I remember how proud you were of him, how you talked about his successes, how you worked overtime to pay for his college. If he didn't see and appreciate that, that's his problem, not yours. His words comforted me a little, though doubts still remained. What if Lawrence was right? What if I really was too focused on the material side of caring, missing out on the emotional side? Thank you, Gareth, I said, for your support. What else are friends for? He chuckled. Listen, why don't we meet at the Chessman tomorrow? We'll play a game or two. I'd love to, I agreed. The next morning began with a loud knock on the door. I was just eating breakfast when I heard the sound, which sounded more like an attempt to break down the door than a polite knock. When I opened the door, I saw a furious Lawrence and Meredith. Both of them were pale, their eyes red from sleep. Meredith stood with her arms crossed over her chest, and Lawrence shifted nervously from foot to foot. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the house. Meredith followed, not even asking permission to enter. I closed the door and turned back to them. I'm listening, I said calmly. You have to reinstate the payments, Lawrence said without preamble. Today. I don't owe anything, I replied. We already discussed it yesterday. You don't understand? He raised his voice. We have large debts. We were counting on that money. That's your problem, not mine, I shrugged. You're adults. Get a job. Cut your expenses. A job? Meredith laughed hysterically. Are you serious? In Lewistown? What's there to find? A waitressing job at a diner? That's a good place to start, I said. Don't make me laugh, she rolled her eyes. I didn't get a marketing degree to serve hamburgers. What was it for? I asked. So you could live off your elderly father-in-law's money? Her face contorted with rage, but Lawrence put his hand on her shoulder, holding her back. Dad, let's talk reasonably. His voice became almost pleading. I admit I made a mistake. I should have been honest with you about my studies. But understand, I really want to be a lawyer. It's just not now. When? I asked. A year from now? 2? 5? Soon, he replied evasively. As soon as my investments start to bring a stable income. And how much of my money have you already invested? He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. About 120,000. I whistled. 120,000. Almost everything I'd put away during my years at the factory. Money that should have provided me with a secure old age. And what exactly did you invest it in? Various projects, he waved his hand. Cryptocurrency, tech startups, NFT. And what were the results? He hesitated again. The market is unstable right now, but experts are predicting growth in the coming months. So you lost money, I summarized. No, I didn't. He was indignant. It's just temporarily not profitable. In other words, I lost it, I shook my head. And now you want me to give you more? It's not like that, Meredith intervened. We're just asking you to fulfill your promise. You promised to pay for Lawrence's education. All education, I emphasized. Not a luxury apartment, not designer clothes, not questionable investments. If Lawrence really wants to study, I can pay his tuition directly to the university. But no more transfers to your accounts. Don't you trust me? Lawrence looked insulted. Have you given me any reason to trust you? I parried. I am your son. He pounded his fist on the table. Isn't that enough? Not after you lied to my face for months. Not after making fun of my life, my job, my values. I apologize for that. He raised his hands to the ceiling. How many times do I have to say I was drunk and not in control of my words? It's not about the words, I repeated tiredly. It's about actions. You used me, Lawrence. You used my love, my care, my money. It's not fair, he turned to shouting. You always do this, always making me look guilty, always looking at me with disappointment. Maybe, I admitted, but this time you really are to blame. You are a cruel man, Errol, Meredith interposed. Lawrence was right about you. You are a cold, calculating egoist who thinks only of himself. Only think of myself? I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. I've spent the last 35 years thinking only of Lawrence, working my ass off to get him the best education, the best start in life, denied myself everything so he could have more opportunities. And this is how he repays me. Stop playing the martyr. Lawrence raised his voice again. You didn't work for me. You worked for me because you didn't know how to live any other way. Because work was your only escape from real life, from real relationships. It's not for you to judge my motives, I said firmly. You didn't even try to understand me. Did you understand me? He stepped closer, his face contorted with anger. For once in your life, have you ever asked me what I really want? Have you ever tried to see me not as an extension of yourself, but as a separate person with her own desires? His words hit something deep inside me. Maybe there was some truth to it. Maybe I did decide for him too often, thinking I knew better. If I was wrong, I said after a pause, I'm sorry, but that doesn't excuse your deception. You are insufferable. Lawrence turned abruptly and kicked the nearest chair. Always right, always faultless. Mom, at least, knew how to forgive. Don't you dare bring Elaine into this. My voice turned icy. She would never approve of what you did. Huh, how would you know? He snorted derisively. You didn't even really know her. You were so busy with your precious work that you didn't notice how she was suffering. Lawrence, I began warningly. No, let him speak, Meredith said. Let him tell the truth you refuse to see. The truth? I looked at them both. You want the truth? Here it is. You're both liars and manipulators. You've used me, sucked my savings, laughed behind my back. And now that the source of money has dried up, you've come in with threats and accusations trying to make me feel guilty. But it's not working anymore. I can see right through you. Lawrence turned pale, then reddened with rage. You're going to regret this, he hissed. I swear you will regret it bitterly. What will you do? I asked calmly. Stop talking to me? Stop inviting me to parties? You've been doing that for years until you needed my money. We have ways, Meredith interjected with a wicked smile. You'd be surprised how much you can do with a man your age, especially a lonely man. Is that a threat? I raised an eyebrow. Just a statement of fact, she shrugged. Think about it, Errol. Think about it. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Both of you. Now, with pleasure, Meredith grabbed her purse. Come on, Lawrence. There's nothing to do here. Lawrence hesitated, looking at me with a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps fear or regret. This is your last chance, Dad, he said. Restore the payments, and we'll forget this conversation. Goodbye, Lawrence, I replied, opening the front door. He stared at me for a few seconds, then turned abruptly and walked out without a word. Meredith followed him, giving me one last venomous glance. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling a strange mixture of devastation and relief. It was over. All illusions of being able to rebuild a relationship with my son had dissipated. All that remained was the bitter truth. The only thing that had bound us together for the last few years was money. Not love, not respect, not family ties, only financial dependence. I walked slowly into the living room and sat in a chair, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Lawrence as a child, Lawrence as a teenager, Lawrence with a college degree. A stranger I didn't appear to know at all. For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not out of self-pity, not out of anger, out of the realization of a loss that didn't happen today or even yesterday. Maybe it started years ago, when I was too busy to notice the growing gap between me and my son. Or maybe Lawrence had always been like this, calculating, selfish, willing to use those closest to him for his own gain. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Gareth. Are you all right? He asked without preamble. I saw Lawrence's car outside your house. Yeah, I answered, wiping my eyes. He and Meredith came by. They demanded that the payments be reinstated. Minus I refused. Good for you. I could hear the approval in Gareth's voice. Hang in there, old man. You're doing the right thing. I know, I said. It hurts. Of course it hurts, he agreed. He's your son. But sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it hurts. Thank you, Gareth. I took a deep breath. For your support. You're welcome, he paused. Listen, why don't we reschedule our meeting for tonight? Sit down, have a drink, talk? I'd love to, I agreed. Meet me at the Chessman at 6? Done. And, Errol? Yes? It'll be all right, sooner or later. I hope so, I said, though I wasn't sure in my heart that it was true. I hung up the phone and sat looking at the pictures for a long time. Then I got up, gathered them all up, and put them in my dresser drawer. The past should stay in the past. It was time to look forward. January in Lewistown was always the harshest month. The snow that fell on Christmas Day turned into muddy drifts along the roadsides. Temperatures plummeted to -25, forcing residents to hide indoors. I was no exception. I spent most of my time in the living room, watching the bleak winter landscape outside the window. It had been 2 weeks since Lawrence and Meredith had come to threaten me. 2 weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, no visits. I expected more attempts at manipulation, but they just seemed to disappear from my life. This should have brought relief, but instead I felt a strange emptiness. On Wednesday, I met up with Gareth at the Chessman. Our weekly chess games had become an anchor of sorts for me, something permanent and reliable in a world that seemed to be crumbling around me. "Have you heard the news?" Gareth asked, moving a pawn. "Your son has moved out of his luxury apartment in River Park." I looked up from the board. "How did you know that?" "Jeff Wilson told me. His nephew works for the management company. Apparently, they couldn't make the monthly rent payment." I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, only fatigue. "And where had they moved to?" "To the Williams Arms," Gareth grimaced. "You know, that old complex on the outskirts?" I did. The Williams Arms was a dilapidated building with tiny apartments, known for its noisy neighbors and constant plumbing problems. A stark contrast to upscale River Park. "What else did Jeff tell me?" I asked, making a counter move. Gareth paused for a moment, as if deciding whether to continue. "There's something else," he finally said, "but I'm not sure you want to hear it." "Tell me." I braced myself for the worst. "His son, the one who teaches at the law school, he's heard talk about your son and his wife." "What kind of talk?" "Apparently they were known in certain circles." Gareth cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your son, he seemed to be offering his wife to wealthy students and certain professors. For money." I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. Lawrence, my son, he couldn't have fallen so low. "Are you sure?" My voice sounded hoarse. "It's a rumor," Gareth answered cautiously, "but Jeff says that several people have confirmed it. One of them is Professor Caldwell, head of the Civil Law Department." I sat stunned by this information. So Lawrence wasn't just lying about his studies. He was— I couldn't even bring myself to fully articulate the thought. I'm sorry, Errol." Gareth put his hand on my shoulder. "Maybe none of this is true. You know how they like to gossip in Lewistown." "Yeah," I nodded, even though my gut said it was true. Everything was falling into place. Their lavish lifestyle, their sudden disappearance after I'd cut off the funding. Check, by the way. We continued the game, but my thoughts were far away. I thought about Lawrence, about the boy I'd raised, the young man he'd become. Where had I gone wrong? What had I done wrong? Or was it inevitable, the result of some hidden flaw in his character that I couldn't or wouldn't see? At the end of the week, I received a letter from Westmoreland Law School, an official notification that student Lawrence Kingsford was interrupting his studies due to financial difficulties. I stared at this document for a long time, not realizing how this was possible. Lawrence was not on the student list. I checked it personally. I called the school and asked to be connected to the administration. After several switchovers, I finally spoke to the vice dean, introducing myself as Lawrence's father. Minus Mr. Kingsford, the voice on the other end was professionally polite. "What can I do for you?" "I've received notice that my son is interrupting his studies," I said. "But the thing is, when I checked a few weeks ago, his name wasn't on the student rolls." A pause on the other end of the line. "One moment, please. Let me check our records." I could hear the tapping of keys and the rustling of papers. Finally, the vice dean returned to the conversation. "Minus Mr. Kingsford, your son has been enrolled in a special program for, special students. This program is not on the general rolls." "Special students?" I questioned you. "What does that mean?" It's, he hesitated. obviously searching for words. It's a program for people with certain connections. It's a one-on-one program with no regular classes. And who approved this program for my son? Professor Caldwell, the deputy answered after a short pause. He personally supervised your son's education. Caldwell. The same name Gareth had mentioned. It was all beginning to come together in a disgusting way. And how long had my son been on this, special program? Yeah, since September last year, was the answer. But he hadn't passed a single exam or submitted a single piece of written work. In fact, he has visited the campus only, rustling papers, 4 times the entire semester. All appointments were with Professor Caldwell in his private office. I see, I said, feeling everything go cold inside. And the tuition? Payment was coming in regularly, the vice dean confirmed. A full semester's worth of tuition, despite the, special nature of the course. Thank you for the information, I said. That's all I wanted to know. I hung up the phone and sat staring into the void for a long time. So Lawrence was enrolled in law school after all, but he wasn't attending. The payments I was transferring were indeed going to Westmoreland. But for what? For a special program organized by Professor Caldwell, who, if rumor was to be believed, was one of Meredith's clients. Disgust and pain flooded me. My son hadn't just cheated on me, he'd stooped to using his wife as a— I couldn't even mentally say the word. And all the while I was funding this nightmare, thinking I was helping him get an education. That night, for the first time in a long time, I pulled out a bottle of scotch I'd been saving for special occasions. If the complete collapse of all illusions about my own son didn't deserve a good scotch, then what did? I poured myself 2 fingers of the amber liquid and sat down by the fireplace. Snow was falling outside the window, covering the world with a white blanket, hiding everything ugly and dirty beneath the pure, pristine white. If only it were as easy to cleanse my life, my memories. I woke up the next day with a clear head and a firm decision. It was time to move on. Lawrence had made his choice, and I couldn't change that. But I could decide how to move on. In bitterness and disappointment, or trying to find new meaning, new joys. I started small. I took apart a closet I hadn't gotten around to in years. Among the old boxes and forgotten things I found my long-neglected hobby, a collection of antique mechanical watches and tools for their restoration. As a young man, even before Lawrence was born, I had a passion for restoring antique clock movements. I could sit for hours over tiny gears and springs, tidying up old pocket watches or wall chronometers. Elaine joked that I was born in the wrong century. I should have been a clockmaker in the 19th century. When Lawrence came along, there was no time for hobbies. Work, family, home, all demanded attention and energy. Gradually, the tools and unfinished projects moved to the closet and then were forgotten. Now, holding the old watch with its time-darkened face, I felt a strange excitement. It was as if I had met an old friend after a long separation. I carefully opened the back cover, examining the complex mechanism inside. Some parts were rusted, others were broken, but the foundation was still strong. This watch could be restored. It just needed time and patience. I spent the next few days setting up a small workshop in the spare room. I ordered missing tools, special oils, and spare parts. I pulled all my old projects out of the pantry, 6 pocket watches of varying degrees of preservation, and one 19th century French wall clock. Working on the clock was exactly what I needed. It required complete concentration, leaving no room for gloomy thoughts. Watches didn't lie, betray, manipulate. They just were. Complex but understandable mechanisms that could be repaired if you knew how they worked. In early February, I decided to take a walk to an antique store on Main Street. The owner, Richard Dobbs, was known for his collection of antique clocks, and I hope to find parts for my projects there. The store was in an old brick building with a picture window behind which a variety of antiques from furniture to jewelry could be seen. The bell above the door jingled melodiously as I entered. "Oh, what can I do for you?" An older woman with silver hair and a neat bun stood up from behind the counter. "I'm looking for Richard Dobbs," I said. "I need parts for an antique clock." "Richard retired last year," she replied with a smile. "I'm his sister, Margaret. I run the store now." "Oh," I was a little confused. "I didn't know. I haven't come in here in a while." "That's all right," she said, with a wave of her hand. "I'm not as good at watches as Richard, but we still have a collection of parts and movements. What exactly are you looking for?" I described what I was looking for, and Margaret led me to the back room of the store, where a variety of watch parts were stored in neat drawers. "Are you a watchmaker?" she asked as I looked through the drawers. "An amateur," I answered. "I used to do restoration work a long time ago, but now I'm back to the hobby." "That's wonderful," she smiled. "Not many people appreciate mechanical watches these days. They're used to digital gadgets that are thrown away as soon as a new model comes out." "Old things have a soul," I said, surprised at my own words. "History, character. They're not just functional, they're beautiful." "Exactly," Margaret nodded with approval. "I always say that. Old things tell stories if you listen." We got to talking. It turned out that Margaret had recently returned to Lewistown after living in Boston for many years, where she taught art history at the university. After retiring, she decided to help her brother with the store, and when he decided to finally retire, she took over the business. "It keeps me energized," she explained, "and it allows me to be surrounded by beautiful things, which I've always loved." I picked out a few pieces that might be useful for my projects, and Margaret expertly packed them into small boxes. "Come back again," she said as I paid. "It's always a pleasure to talk to someone who appreciates antiques." "I will," I replied. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't just a polite formula. When I got home, I started working on the clock with renewed enthusiasm. Time flew by. I could spend all day bent over the tiny mechanisms, forgetting about food and rest. For the first time in months, I felt happy? No, not really. More like at peace. As if I had found my place in a world that had suddenly become too complex and alien. In mid-February, I got an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, and I hesitated for a moment before answering. Wasn't it Lawrence, calling from a new phone? "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Minus Mr. Kingsford? Errol Kingsford?" The woman's voice sounded official. "Yes, that's me. My name is Sarah Jenkins, and I'm with Lewistown Social Services. We received, uh, a report of possible problems." "Problems?" I didn't know what she was talking about. "Yeah, someone reported that you—" She hesitated. "That you might have trouble with self-care. That you might need help or supervision." I felt the blood rush to my face with indignation. "That's an absolute lie," I said firmly. "I'm completely independent and don't need any help." "I understand," she said, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. "But we have a duty to check all messages. Perhaps you could come to our office for a brief conversation. Or, if it's more convenient for you, I can come to your home." I knew immediately where the wind was coming from. Lawrence and Meredith had decided to get back at me by using the social safety net. "We have ways," Meredith's words reminded me. "They hope to have me declared incompetent and have a guardian appointed, perhaps Lawrence himself, and then he would have control of my finances." "I'll come to your office," I said, trying to remain calm. "What time would be convenient for you?" We made an appointment for the next day. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of anger and frustration. Had Lawrence really stooped to this? Did money mean more to him than basic decency? After all I had learned about his studies and his ways of making money, nothing should have surprised me. The next day I put on my best suit and went to the social services office. Sarah Jenkins was a young woman with tired eyes and a folder full of papers. She asked the standard questions about my health, my daily routine, my ability to care for myself. I answered calmly and judiciously, showing complete clarity of mind. "Do you know who might have made the complaint?" she asked at the end of the conversation. "My son, I think," I answered honestly. "We had a conflict recently. I stopped supporting him financially, and he didn't take it well." Sarah nodded, making notes in her notebook. "I see. If I may ask, how old are you, Mr. Kingsford?" 62, I answered. "Too young for dementia and too old for teenage rebellion." She smiled slightly. "You seem a perfectly sane and independent man, Mr. Kingsford. I don't see any cause for concern." "Thank you." I rose to leave. "But still," she added, "if you ever need help with shopping, cleaning, or anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. We have volunteer programs for older Lewistown residents." "I'll keep that in mind," I promised, even though I knew I'd never take advantage of the offer. Walking out of the social services office, I felt strangely relieved. Lawrence's attempt to manipulate the system had failed, but the very fact that he'd gone along with it spoke volumes about how far he was willing to go for money. On my way home, I decided to stop by an antique store. I didn't need new parts for the clock. I just wanted to talk to Margaret, the only other person besides Gareth that I'd enjoyed talking to lately. She was in the store, arranging books on a shelf. "Errol," she exclaimed when she saw me, "how is the work on the clock progressing?" "Slowly but surely," I answered. "I've already restored two of the movements. It's ticking again." "That's wonderful," she smiled. "Would you like some tea?" I was just about to take a break. We drank tea in the back room of the store, surrounded by antiques. Margaret talked about her life in Boston, about the students she taught to appreciate art, about traveling to Europe to study ancient architecture. "Do you have a family?" she asked in between. "A son," I answered. "But we don't talk to each other." She seemed to sense my reluctance to broach the subject, so she didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she showed me her own collection, the 18th century miniature paintings she'd collected all her life. "They're so personal," she explained, showing me a tiny portrait of a woman with a dog. "You can hold them in your hands, look at them up close. There's an intimacy to them that the big paintings don't have." I understood what she meant. My pocket watch had the same intimacy. It was worn close to my heart. It counted down the minutes of someone's life, witnessed the joys and sorrows of its owners. Returning home, I thought about how strangely life works. I had lost a son, not physically, but emotionally, morally. The man I raised, loved, lived for was no longer in my life, and most likely never will be. Too much has been destroyed, too much betrayal, and yet I didn't feel as alone as I used to. New old hobbies, new acquaintances, new interests. Life went on, finding new channels, like a river after a collapse. In early March, I finished restoring the French wall clock, my most ambitious project yet. They were running accurately again, chiming melodiously every hour. I hung them in the living room, listening with pleasure to their measured ticking, which filled the house with a lively sound. That same afternoon the doorbell rang. Margaret stood on the threshold with a small box in her hands. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "I just wanted to show you something. Richard sent some rare clock movements from Florida, and I thought you might like to see them." I invited her into the house, and we spent several hours looking at the parts sent and discussing possible projects. Then I showed her my restored clock, and she was delighted with the French wall chronometer. "It's beautiful," she said, looking at the gilded dial. "You've done an amazing job." "Thank you." I felt a surge of pride. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. "Definitely," she smiled. "You know, I always thought old things were like people. They have their own character, their own story, and sometimes they just need someone to see their value beneath the layer of dust and time. There was a wisdom in her words that made me reflect on my own life. Maybe I too was like that old clock, a bit time-worn with a few broken parts, but still able to function with a little effort and care. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I asked out of the blue. "Nothing fancy, just a home-cooked meal." "I'd love to," she replied with a warm smile.